everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty. I'm Melanie, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of painting and a little bit of crafting. You know I like to add a crafty touch to some of my paintings. Today I'm going to be revisiting my beginning painting roots. I was a decorative painter, started there in the 90s, and I stumbled across a delightful channel, Chris Hugh, and she's a very talented painter, and she just inspired me again to get my brushes out, do this little technique, and I wanted to share it with you too. I wanted to do a set of characters, a Santa, a snowman, and a gingerbread, and I was thinking metal spoons, but you know what? I had an idea to do a DIY wooden spoon. So I'm going to show you how you can make these DIY wooden spoons and make these cute ornaments. It's almost Thanksgiving time. I'm looking forward to joining my family for Thanksgiving time, and I already have a 5-year-old granddaughter who's already announced that we're making Christmas ornaments when Grandma comes to visit, and I'm so looking forward to doing it. Today I'm a part of the What Would You Make collaboration. It's a monthly collaboration. We have 2 hosts today. We have Brenda with Rustic and Lace DIY, Christine with Divine Design, and 1 guest host, Cynde with Z9 Designs. Now you're going to find the links to their channels down inside of the description box, as well as the playlist for all of the other creators who are joining in today's collaboration. Take some time, click that list. I'm sure you're going to be inspired to create something fun for your home this holiday season. Well, let's get crafting. I've got lots to share with you, and I'm so glad you're here. To create the smaller wooden spoons, I used these ones that I found at my local Dollar General store. Measured 6.5 inches up, used a scroll saw to cut the tops, it cuts fairly easily, and drilled another hole to be able to hang my ornament. To seal the wooden spoons, I put a layer of DecoArt multi-purpose sealer on. This is just going to help seal my wood and give a nice surface to paint on. The blue hat I did in Bahama blue, Santa got a primary red hat, and the little ginger got a Hauser green color. To do Santa's beard, I base coated that in slate gray. To create the eyes for these sweet little faces, I like to do oval eyes with the tops pointing in slightly and then coming out. I create these little deep smiles, add hearts onto the end of the smiles for the snowman and the ginger. Santa's face is drawn in an upside down U shape and then base coated in with the color warm beige. I add warm beige to the ginger's cheeks and the nose since I'm going to be painting them a bright red color, and it just shows up better on that lighter shade of tan than on that deeper chocolate. Once I have them all drawn, I'm ready to go ahead and start the floating process. I'm going to be using the color Light Cinnamon to create this water float process. A little bit of paint is really going to change the look of these characters. My paintbrush of choice to do this painting technique is an angle brush. I love having that sharp little point on the toe of the brush, and then it carries across at an angle to the heel. Yep, did you know that your paintbrush has a toe and a heel? It does, and both ends work differently for this little process. When doing the floating, you dip your paintbrush into the water, come out. Sometimes you have a little puddle of water off to the side, and you can kind of see it there. But I dip my paintbrush, the toe, just in my paint, rub it back and forth so the color is going to gradually go across my paintbrush and float this beautiful shading line. This shading process is what I do around all the outside of the ornaments and on my Santa's face. It just adds that next layer of character to these little whimsical pieces. To create the carrot nose, I like using a little flat brush, or an angle brush works too, and I like to use a little tap motion and then bring my nose up. It's a little wider in the back, and then it just kind of goes to a point off to the side. But by doing that little tap motion, it creates the little ridges in the carrots pretty easily. Now it's time to go ahead and paint in those hearts and the noses for the little snowman and for the ginger. I'm using the primary red for this, and hopefully you can kind of see a difference of having that lighter color underneath really helps my red show through. You'll notice here how brightly that red shows through on the white, even versus over top of that lighter shade that I put on the gingerbread face. I'm using a smaller brush to do these. It's the fine detail. It's important to make sure your brush is loaded correctly, which means you do have some water in there to get your paint to move. If your paint doesn't move and it's dry, you just need to add a little bit more water and it's going to flow a lot easier. To paint the eyes, I'm using the color Lamp Black. You saw me add a little bit of water to that paint. I twist and pull my brush towards me. I'm using a small round brush, so I want a nice little point at the end. So by putting my paint in there, twisting and pulling my paintbrush to me, I'm going to reestablish that nice point and be able to paint these a lot easier. Use the brush that feels comfortable in your hand and for the size that you want to paint. Remember, you can always turn those little items upside down and pull that color towards you. I find it easier when I'm painting often is to pull towards me, and I'm able to have a little bit more control of my brush. I wanted to add a little bit of that slate gray to create the eyebrows for Santa. I want him to have nice bushy eyebrows in the end, so I wanted to include that same color for the beard and his hair underneath on his eyebrows. Use that small brush and do the little strokes of like how eyebrows grow. To ensure that my color of red was nice and bright, I did add another layer of that primary red. To do the shadowing on my nose for the carrot nose, I took a little bit of my pumpkin color, added a little bit of the light cinnamon to it, and created a nice little warm shade to put underneath my nose and on the back side of my nose. Now to do the smiles, I did draw them lightly with pencil first. Took a little bit of the lamp black, made sure it was a nice loose color with lots of water so my brush was going to be able to glide smoothly across. It's better to go ahead and just stop completely instead of pushing down harder on your brush when you're doing these little smiles. I can show you here. Light pressure all the way across, you're going to get the same line width. As soon as you push harder, your line's going to get a little thicker. So it's better to do a full line and have to reload your brush than it is to push down harder to get more paint out. The float color I'm going to be adding to my red hat is called Deep Burgundy. I do the same floating technique like I did for around the faces. It's simply the same way. I'm going to float that color around my hat to add another layer of color to the red. Since I have this color out, it's a great color to use for the cheeks. So I'm going to be using this color for all the cheeks on my Snowman, my Ginger, and my Santa. To do the cheeks, I like using a soft nylon brush. This one's really scrubby. I've had it for a long time. I go ahead and load that brush up, give it a little bit of a blending, and push down into my paint, down into the brush. Give it a swirl on some paper towel, but as a final test, I put it on my hand, and if the paint is dry, it's ready to do cheeks. I like to do both sides, a little bit on one, go over and do the other one, and then your cheeks have a better chance of looking the same when you get done. A little bit of pressure at first and then go stronger as you go. It's easier to always add more. It's a little harder to take it off once you get too much. I go right over the tops of those all heart areas and create those rosy cheeks. It really does bring those little characters to life. To add the next layer of color to my eye, I'm going to go down to about an 1/8 inch angle brush and then float in the color Spa Blue. You want to float this color on the right side of each eye. Start at the bottom and then pull towards you. These colors look a little bright right away, but because there's so much water, they're going to flatten out and dull. So you may think it looks kind of bright now, but it's going to flatten out and look good. Don't stress too much about this process. You just got to get it on and trust the process. You could always take a little bit of a little more water if you think you have too much and you've lost your black. You can go ahead and wipe a little bit of it out. Use that heel of your brush to be able to smooth out some of the color. Use the toe to put it on and the heel to remove it. Now to add a float line to help set the eyes back into the head so it doesn't look like they're just painted on top. Take your cinnamon color, your light cinnamon color, and float a line on the outside of your eyes and just a little bit underneath and halfway up on the other side. If you get too heavy on the bottom, it makes Santa look like he's had kind of a hard night and he's got big circles underneath his eyes, so go light underneath the bottom. Take that same color, add a float underneath the nose, add it to underneath the eyebrows, and then underneath their smiles. And you're going to add just another layer of character. Like I said before, just a little bit of paint really does change the look of these characters. To help set the red off just a tiny bit more, I take the deep burgundy and I do a little bit of a float color just to add another layer of dark to those cheeks and to the nose on the ginger. It does bring that red to life. Sometimes your reds look a little flat if you don't have the depth to it, so by adding that little pop of color, it really does bring the reds to life. To create the final darkest shadow on top of my red, I'm going to be using the lamp black as the shadow color. It looks great over this shade of red. Make sure you carry that shadow over on the edge of your hats. I'm also going to be using that same color on the little red cheeks and on my little ginger's nose. It just adds that little extra bit of color. So choose a side that you want to add your shadows on and create the shadow on that one side. The faces of the ginger and the snowman are almost done, and let's go ahead and put some more color on their hat. I chose a little bit of a royal blue color for the hat, making sure I put it on the front and the sides as well. I have plenty of water in this floated technique here. I wanted it to be real soft, not have any hard edges, so I add plenty of water when I'm loading my brush and continue with that color. This is kind of just a medium shade of green. Once those colors have dried, I went ahead and created a darker shade of the colors I just had used. I did this by adding a little black to each color. When you're mixing colors like that and adding black to your primary color, make sure you're going slow. It can easily overpower your color. Again, I'm adding plenty of water to make sure my floats are nice and soft in the end. The last bit of shading I did on my carrot nose, I mixed a little bit darker shade of rusty red color. Took some of the burgundy, a little bit of my orange, and created a shadow on the top a little ways and on that end of the carrot. It just adds another layer of character to that nose. I add a tiny little bit of a float of the cinnamon color just to add to the back of the nose and underneath. This is going to do the same type of a look just like we did for our eyes, so it didn't look like the item was just painted on top and not a part of the face. By adding that little tiny shadow from behind the nose and underneath, it's going to make it look like the carrot is a part of your snowman's face. The final step is to add the twinkle to these faces, and I'm going to be using a stylus to create the little sparkle. I'm going to be using a dip, dot, drag technique. I'm going to be adding the little comma marks on the blue shaded part of the eye that we created. So I'm going to dip my stylus into the paint, make a dot, and then drag it down. These eyes are small, and this little stylus works perfect to make the comma marks. I also created that dip, dot, drag look on this little guy's nose as well. Now we're going to be adding a little bit more sparkle onto the outside of the eyes, and I'm going to be adding 2 dots. Actually, I think I added them to the inside on this one, but I do like them on the outside better. So I went ahead and did my dip, dot, drag on the blue part, then created the 2 little dots at the top on the outside. And if I do them on the outside of one eye, I need to do them on the inside of the other side of the eye. And then your little guy's not going to look cross-eyed or funny wonky eyes if you do it that way. So dip, drag on the blue parts. That's going to bring the inside of your eye to life. And then go to the outside, put your little dots over there. So on the outside of the one eye, and then I have to do them on the inside of my other eye. I'm going to do a dip, drag dot on the little nose as well, just to give it a little sparkle. You can add them onto your cheeks as well. I usually do no more than 2 taps. Each time you tap your stylus, your dot's going to get smaller. So keep that in mind. Sometimes if you go to 3 with these small sizes, they get too small. I add a dip, dot, drop, a little heart comma on my hearts. I'm going to add a few little dots on my nose. It's a great little tool to add the little lines on your carrot too. So again, dip, dot, and drag. And then I add a few little dots to the back. The stylus is a great tool to add these little sparkles to your items, especially when you have these small parts to paint. It's a perfect little tool to get right in there where you need your dots. So much easier than using a brush. Too cute, right? Now it's time to go ahead and work on this Santa beard. I'm going to be using a rake brush. If you haven't ever used a rake brush, it's a great brush to create beards. Sometimes Santas look intimidating because you think, how am I going to paint all of that hair-like beard texture? A rake brush is perfect. You want to water down your paint so it's nice and thin. Load your brush. You kind of saw me kind of scrubbing my brush a little bit, making sure my brush was fully loaded. And then you're going to use the tips of your bristles and more stroke like straight up and down. So don't hold your brush so flat. Go light with your pressure, and those little hairlines are just going to show up. So I'm doing the beard and the sides of his face first. Again, this is a white watered down paint, so it's going to look bright right now, but as it dries, it's going to fade. So it's going to take a couple layers to create this beard. But I'm just coming in and just lightly combing the beard, and you want to comb in the direction of way hair would grow. So as you can see, I'm going down and kind of swooping around and creating that little beard texture in the way a beard might grow. Pretty simple to do, and it's a great look. It's a super fun brush to have. Go ahead and give it a dry and then do another layer. We're going to be adding a little bit of shading to this before we do our final shade of white. So once this is dried, I take my brush, and this time I'm going to be using the color Raw Umber to do my floating color. I'm coming straight across with my toe of my brush and then using the heel to drag my color down into the hair of my Santa. This is just going to add just kind of a nice little shade, and it's not going to just sit right at the top. It's going to drag down and kind of make a soft little blended look into the whiskers. So again, do the same thing where you're picking up your color on the toe of your brush and then coming across your area. I had drawn the little mustache in there, so I'm going to go underneath my mustache area. That's going to help create a shadow line there. I'm going to be doing the mustache in a different step, but right now I'm still working on the beard. Going in and softening that out. If your lines get too harsh, add a little bit more water and drag your float color out. Don't worry about getting too much close to your face. We're going to be adding a few little wispies of hair from Santa to be able to cover that up. I add a little bit of that color at the bottom of his beard as well. He's going to end up with a white beard at the end. We just need those layers of color to give that little whisker area more depth. I gave that area dry, and then now I'm coming back in with another layer of that white. We want his beard to be nice and bright and white at the end, but we need the shadows to give it the depth. And that's how you work that little rake brush, and it works perfect to create these Santa Claus whiskers. Now I'm going to come in with a liner brush, and I'm going to use that to create the mustache. And I'm just using simple little swooshy marks. I'm coming in quickly, light texture, and just moving my hand in a direction of way a mustache might want to grow. I want to make sure I have a little curled up. I like the look of having that mustache kind of go around and curl up. So I'm just doing that motion with my hand. Again, this is a watered down white, so it's going to look bright at first, but then it's going to dry a little bit duller, so you're going to have to do a few coats. So I come in, do those little quick strokes. I'm going to let it dry and add the shadowing on this one as well. I'm going to do that same look. Now I'm coming in here and I'm adding a little bit of wispies around Santa's face. You can see me where I'm carrying that little hair in. So that's why I said you didn't have to worry too much if your dark got over on his face, because we were going to be covering it up anyway. This little bit of texture adds just that softness to your little Santa. So it's worth doing those little extra steps of adding those tiny little bit of detail to the whisker lines. You're going to do his eyebrows the same way. You're just going to paint them to make them those little simple strokes, fast kind of strokes. And that's going to help give that bushiness to his Santa's eyes. And now I'm doing that same shading with the raw umber float. I'm coming on each side of his nose, doing that little float and then pulling that color out. And then once that dries, I'm going to be adding another layer of the bright white over the top. Hopefully you can see how this is making a difference by building the beard. I need to add a little bit of a mouth area for my Santa, so I'm coming in and just painting a little triangle shape underneath. So I'm adding the black, and then I'm going to be adding a lip color. I basically mixed a little bit of red and some of the skin tone together to make a bottom lip by just kind of creating a U shape underneath there. You usually don't want to get too bright, otherwise Santa will look like he's wearing lipstick, or too dull, and then it makes him look like he has chapped lips. So kind of just mix a little rosy color and create that lip underneath. Let your white colors dry, and then it's time to add the last bits of white on there. You want your mustache to be the same tone and brightness as your beard, so go ahead and check to see what color it is and then add your final little strokes in. I add some to my beard as well, and just making sure it's nice and bright. We want that bright shade of white for our Santa, but you can still see those dark colors underneath, and that just really brings that beard and mustache to life. Hopefully you've been encouraged to try doing that little mustache by using that simple brush and seeing how easily you can create the hair look of these little guys. Have to add a few little final curls on the side of Santa's head, brighten up his little eyebrows as too. You want this guy to look nice and cheery and bright in the end. The final painted detail I wanted to add was some dots to my hats. I used a stylus again. This time the ballpoint was a little bigger so I could have larger dots. I went ahead and added them to the Santa hat and to the green and to the blue. They look super cute in the end. I knew I was going to be adding some more details on there. This was just going to be an underneath process. Oops, I fibbed. I did add one more color. I took a little desert turquoise to add kind of a frosty blue element to all the little different characters. It adds just a fun little surprise of color and adds that little frosty bit of blue on them. I knew I wanted to add a little bit of fur to the hats, and this ribbon that I found at Joann Fabrics worked perfect to do that. It just cut wonderfully underneath, and I was able to add that little bit of fur element just to add that little extra whimsy to these guys. I wanted to be able to wrap some wire around the hats, so this jewelry wire that was easily bendable worked perfect. I had this string of bells that were already wired together, but they were too far apart and they didn't wrap by themselves to be out correctly so you would actually see all the bells. So I decided to wrap that along with my jewelry wire. So I kind of crisscrossed the bells in the front so you would be able to see them and continued to wrap the jewelry wire around the handle. Once I got to the top, I fed it back through the hole, and then I went behind and kind of just slipped that wire behind there. Since the wire was easily pliable, I didn't feel like I needed to glue it or anything once I had it on there. Plus, these are ornaments, so they're not going to be handled a lot, and I didn't feel like I had to glue it anyway, and I just wrapped it around and tightly enough so that the wire stayed on. I thought it was kind of a nice finishing touch to these little guys. And then just for a final little bitsies on there, I took some of the frosted evergreens, and when I glued the fur down, I didn't glue it completely all the way tight at the top. I wanted to be able to have room so that I could slide down some of those little elements inside. So I was able to glue a little bit of those evergreen pieces down inside of there at the top of the hat. And it just was so cute. It turned out great. I love the way these little furry hats look with just a little touch of Christmas at the top. To add a little bit of glitter touch to my projects, I use stickles in the color of diamond. I love using stickles because the glitter is inside of glue. It has a fine little precision tip at the end, so you can get into small little areas and apply your glitter just where you would like to have the sparkle. Well, let's see what these little guys look like all hung up on my fireplace. It's getting so full with all the different projects I've made on my channel for this Christmas season. If you're new to my channel and you like doing arts and crafts, come on over and see what I have to offer. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. I'd like to say a special thank you to Brenda and Christine for hosting today's What Would You Make collaboration. Make sure you check out their channels inside of the description box and take a little time and click that playlist so you can see all the other creative ideas that people are sharing today in this What Would You Make collaboration. If you would like to see how I made some of these other items, check out my channel. The videos are there. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, and hopefully you'll come back and see me again. And next time, you'll create right along with me.